Live stream will be starting soon, and we encourage everyone to join us in the chat box to the right of the stream. Use the question tab to ask your questions or to upvote your favorite questions from other attendees. You can also answer polling questions under polls to give your live vote. Our analysts and panel speakers will be addressing your questions and the polling answers during the live stream. Ask your questions early in the presentation, as our analysts will choose the most upvoted questions to be addressed by the session speakers. If you have any questions during the stream about SwapCard, our team is standing by to help. Just drop a message in the chat or message one of Parks Associates team members via the Parks Associates company page. Thank you for joining the session. We will be going live in just a few moments. Welcome to the Connections community. My name is Elizabeth Parks, and I'm the president of Parks Associates, a market research and consulting firm focused on emerging consumer technologies. Since 1986, we've been looking closely at emerging products in the home for consumers, consumer devices and services like home security and automation, connected entertainment, connected health, and broadband services in the home. This year would have been our 24th year to host our signature event, Connections, the premier connected home conference. We would also be hosting our 15th annual Connections Europe event in November in Amsterdam. It's an enormous disappointment that we can't host our live in-person events. We know how big a role they play in networking, visibility for leading players in the smart home space, and interacting with our analyst team and key players. In place of these live events, we are bringing you the Connections community, a virtual experience that will take place through the end of November. We will be live streaming our analysts, industry leaders, and hosting panel discussions through the SwapCard platform, where attendees can log in for live viewing, view past recorded sessions, and interact with fellow Connections community participants. We want to thank our sponsors of our events, many whom have supported our efforts for years. This year's sponsors include Sutherland, Alarm.com, Bitdefender, Cox, IntelliThings, Cerent, Everrise, MMB Networks, ServiceLive, Zen Ecosystems, Firedome, Inspire Energy, Z-Wave Alliance, April Air, Gagion, Sprosty Network, and Y-Charge. We really are striving to bring individuals together to network and communicate about the important issues our industries are facing, particularly as we all navigate the new way to accomplish things. Our Connections community platform allows for a live stream view and conversations with our community members. You can ask questions, chat with the group, chat with individuals, and even have a video meeting spontaneously with community members. Following this session, we will have open networking discussions on video for more dialogue with our analyst team and community members. For our first session, we heard from industry leaders talking about new opportunities to expand smart home adoption in MDUs. Andrew Beach, Vice President of Technology from Mill Creek Residential, provided our visionary comments, and then our Director of Research, Brad Russell, shared some of Parks Associates' latest data, followed by a discussion including Google, Greystar, SmartRent, and Stratus. We are really excited about our upcoming sessions focused on energy management in the home, the impact of connectivity in cars, smart home and health services, support of consumer devices in the home network, and privacy and security issues. These virtual experiences lead up to 3 days of networking fun, hosted November 10th through the 12th, where Parks Associates will present new data and moderate discussions on the state of the smart home market, the value and elevated user experiences, monitoring and expansion beyond security systems, smart home platforms, seniors and technology, and the impact of new technologies focused on proactive and predictive analytics, as well as the impact of 5G and Wi-Fi 6. We are proud to bring together over 750 executives so far, with more members joining daily, and we look forward to your feedback. For any comments or interest in participating, within the Connections community as a sponsor or speaker, please feel free to reach out to me or any of the Parks Associates team members. Thank you for being part of the Connections community. We hope you enjoy the panel and visionary insight beginning soon.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second in our series of Connections community events. I am Patrice Samuels, and I'm a senior analyst with Parks Associates, and I'll be hosting today's event. So we will kick it off with some analyst insights, which covers the demand for energy management in the smart home. Then we will have some visionary insights from Energy Hub, and that will, of course, lead into our interactive panel discussion titled Driving Engagement and Participation in Energy Saving Solutions. And then we'll tie it all up with some post-session discussions. And you can find these networking discussions under the agenda tab. So you look there and you'll find networking discussions. The title of those discussions are Effective Incentives for Energy Program Participation and Leveraging Smart Devices and Voice Control in Energy Management. Now, when it comes to concerns about energy, we know that one size does not fit all. Some consumers live in states where the energy costs are significantly higher, or they may live in regions where weather fluctuations tend to be higher, which leads to their energy costs being higher. And we do have some consumers who are just generally more concerned about their carbon footprint than others. So when it comes to energy management, different consumers do have different needs. So what we're finding now is that the majority of consumers do take some level of mindful action or minor actions to save energy. So mindful actions may include, setting a thermostat back when you leave the home, or waiting until the dishwasher is full to run it, things like that. And then home improvement actions may involve, switching to an energy-saving smart device or smart appliance, or increasing the level of insulation within the home. And then you have extreme measures, which may include investing in a solar panel, or getting a variable speed pool pump. Now, what we're finding is that we have about 30% of consumers, or 40%, pardon me, of consumers who take these home improvement measures, and then we have 10% of consumers who take these extreme actions. Can you get me up on the notes a little bit? Thank you. All right, so what we're finding now is that we have more consumers taking significant actions now compared to the past, right? So we're seeing that from this chart that you're looking at, that 36% of consumers fall into that home improvement category, and then we have about 42% that fall into that category now in 2019 compared to 2016. So we do see where the consumers who fall into that into that minor actions category or home improvement category, as well as extreme measures category, is actually improving. And these are the consumers that we think will actually, participate in these energy management programs, or, utility based programs. Now, surprisingly, we have found that, we're finding that there's no actual regional correlation between those consumers who are more likely to take those extreme measures and those who are likely to take, home improvement actions or mindful actions. We're not finding that there's any regional correlation there. What we are finding is that consumers who live in urban areas are actually the most likely to fall into that extreme measures category. And what we suspect here is that, the cost of energy or electricity in urban areas is generally higher, and that's sort of driving some of that, what we're seeing there. Now, especially when you look at the next slide, you can see that consumers who take these energy or extreme energy measures are more likely to have higher average energy bills. So you're seeing where those who fall into the extreme measures category actually have an average energy bill of $200 per month. Whereas when you look at those in the home improvement category, we're seeing where those have an average energy bill of $151 per month. And those who fall sort of in that mindful actions category are, have pay even less for energy on average per month. So there's definitely a connection there between the amount that consumers pay for energy and the types of actions that they're likely to take to save energy. Now, when we examine enrolling in utility energy programs, which we also consider to be sort of a step above taking those mindful actions or minor actions, we see where 35% of US broadband households now participate in these programs. And when we break it down to the different programs, we're finding that 11% of US broadband households participate in load control programs, and another 11% in time of use rate plans, and also for those who participate in rebates and incentives. Now we're seeing a slight increase there in participation for those who participate in the load control programs and of course the time of use rate plans. But overall, for programs that have been available to consumers for a very long time, we're finding that participation has remained fairly low. So when we think about what the possible reasons are, of course, familiarity is one glaring issue. And we see where, for a long time, familiarity with these programs, you can see from the chart there, has remained well below 20%. So, we did see a slight uptick in towards the end of 2019. However, for so many years it has remained low. So we're pretty hopeful that that's a pretty positive trend, and we're hoping to see that continue. Now, of course, outside of familiarity, other factors do affect participation as well. And that might include, the incentives or the types of incentives that consumers have to participate. So for example, the rebate payouts that consumers are getting for, the energy efficient appliances or smart devices may not be significant enough for them to go out and purchase these products. Of course, the incentives for demand response programs as well might not be significant enough for consumers to be persuaded to give up control of their products. And then the level of effort when it comes to energy efficiency and management in general, the level of effort that consumers have to, expend to save energy might just not be worth the energy savings that they receive at the end of the day. So incentives are definitely an issue that we might have to examine as well while we look into familiarity and all the other possible factors that might be impacting this. Now, one implication where level of effort is concerned is that automation will play a critical role in driving participation in energy management programs going forward. And that is one of the reasons why the smart home is perceived as a significant opportunity where energy management is concerned. Now, when we look at adoption of those smart devices that have applications in energy management, we see where consumers are adopting those smart devices that can be used in energy management. So smart thermostats, for example, those are actually the smart device with the highest level of adoption within the category. Smart light bulbs, you can also see that there as well. Those also have relatively high adoption, and we see where that has been growing slightly. Now, smart plug adoption has also been growing, and this market over the past few years has become very competitive. So what we're finding is that as smart plug manufacturers try to compete in this market, many are adding these smart energy management applications, such as just energy monitoring of the products within the home, or providing alerts for when the energy usage is at a certain level. So these providers are actually applying these energy management services or use cases within the product in an effort to differentiate your products and drive adoption of smart plugs. Smart appliances are also gaining traction. Smart refrigerators, as you can see there, has the highest adoption. And those, of course, have very strong or pretty strong applications in energy management. But what's interesting to note is that other appliances that have significant use cases in energy management as well are also growing, and those include the smart water heaters and smart standalone air conditioning units that you see there at 4% adoption among US broadband households. Now, if we are wondering if consumers will find these features for smart devices, appealing or interesting, our research is showing that consumers who own or intend to purchase smart thermostats actually rank energy management features at the top. So automated features like sensing when someone is in the home and making adjustments to save money, learning how my home reacts to weather and making adjustments to save money, or just making adjustments when the electricity rates are higher in an effort to save some energy. Those features are the features that consumers who intend to purchase the devices or those who already own the devices rank as most important for purchase. Now, when we look at the smart features that are interesting for smart appliances, for smart refrigerators here, we see where it depends on the particular feature. The energy management, the one that rises to the top there is the one that involves automation. So you see we're automatically adjusting the refrigerator to maximize energy or maximize energy savings is the one that is on the top. And we do have tips and notifications falling a little bit lower there in terms of importance. Now for ovens, we see where the energy saving features do not rank at the top in terms of most important. However, it is still important to note that 28% of smart oven owners or people who intend to purchase these perceive tips for energy savings as one of their most important purchase considerations. Now, the importance of energy management features, as you can see there, is a little bit lower for smart washer dryer owners and intenders. And even for the automated feature there, where you automatically delay the start times until the energy cost is low, it tends to rank more in the middle of the feature sets rather than at the top. One of the things that's important to note is that this is not a reflection of the level of repeal, this chart you're looking at, of the feature, but the percentage who claim that this feature is one of their top 3 features for purchasing the product, right? So of course, this has implications as well for device manufacturers, to build these energy management features into their products. And what we're realizing that this has spawned is that it has sort of led to a few partnerships among players in the energy space and those in the smart home sector. And these partnerships have included co-marketing partnerships between, for example, smart thermostat manufacturers like Nest and energy providers like Comet, where we have the energy provider or utility promoting these energy saving capabilities in the smart product. And then we have the smart product manufacturer promoting its use in the utility energy management program. So with that, we're going to get some insight from our visionary speaker for today, who is Erica Diamond from Energy Hub, and she'll be talking about consumer-centric DER management. And we'll give it just a few seconds while we transition to Erica.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I was really excited to see a lot of those updated stats about how customers think about their smart home energy appliances, and that sort of dovetails nicely with how Energy Hub thinks about its programs and how to grow them. So today, I am sorry, I'm going to figure out how to advance this. There we go. Today, I'm going to talk to you all about two trends in the utility industry. On the left, utilities are adopting renewables at a massive scale, largely driven by RPS mandates or carbon goals that utilities may be setting for themselves or regulators may be setting for them. I'm sure most of you know that the existence of these on the grid are creating intermittent supply, which is really a big change for utilities from sort of conventional supply where you know what's going to happen all throughout the day and evening. Solar and wind make that a little bit harder to predict, and there's a lot of flexibility that's needed to sort of meet those changes. On the right side, you have customers adopting all of these behind the meter DERs, including electric vehicles and electric vehicle chargers. And actually, each one of those that gets installed can provide flexibility to the grid to offset the stuff that's happening on the left. Those two trends really need to come together. And it's really on utilities to figure out how are we going to operate this renewable heavy grid in a way that incorporates the flexibility that's provided by all of these customer cited DERs. So I think one thing that we often do is we forget that customer cited DERs are actually available in large numbers. So we typically talk about the utility stuff as utility scale, but the customer installed stuff is really at utility scale already. So this slide is a little old. I think we're probably past 15 million smart connected thermostats today in the US. There are likely more than a million electric vehicles on the road, and there's around 2 million rooftop solar. So all of that today is really at grid scale. These aren't, the small pilots that we saw in the early 2000s. Customers are adopting multiple brands of these kinds of DERs. So this isn't as easy as how does a utility connect to one brand, one type of vehicle. It's how do we operate or have access to all of these devices so that we can think of them in concert to help offset the intermittency that has come to be on our grid. And this problem is really only growing. So 400 gigawatts, this is how many DERs are expected to be deployed around the world in the next 10 years. It's a very large number. Utilities are sort of faced with the problem of how do we both integrate all of these DERs in a way that is valuable, but also equitable, scalable, and also future-proof. This is the thing that we hear a lot from customers is, that's great, we can do blunt force demand response today, but in the future, what are we going to do to address the fact that this trend is only growing? So in order to make use of these, if you think about it, it's not the same strategy as controlling the sort of few big generators that the utility used to control. It's what we need a system that will allow us to engage customers, which I think is, to me, probably the key point early on, to aggregate the resource and then to get that resource to do the things that you want it to do, which is what we call grid services. And also at the same time to understand what are those devices doing on your grid at any one time in any one place. And we tend to refer to that as situational awareness. And I think the most important point there is that I am talking about all of this stuff at the aggregate level. So even though we know what's important to consumers is sort of how energy is being managed in the home, and I do think that is important for an individual customer, the most important thing for the utility is how do we manage all of these things together in aggregate at the fleet level in order to maximize the value to utilities, but also really maximize the value to consumers. One of the utilities that is doing this sort of early stages, but doing this really well is Eversource. in the Northeast. They have sort of taken a multi-DER approach where they are incorporating a range of different devices that customers are bringing to programs. So BYOD, thermostats, batteries, EV chargers. All three programs are designed a little bit differently. So obviously thermostats are sort of the first DER to get to scale. And we can take what we've learned from thermostat programs and apply them to batteries and EV chargers. All of these devices, if you think about it, are also offered to customers in a different way, which I think is an interesting problem for us all to solve. So thermostats, you can buy at retail, you can buy online. EV chargers, somewhere in the middle. So you might buy that with your vehicle. You might buy it online, a utility marketplace. But typically, it's still a little bit closer to retail. But when you think about a battery, you're not necessarily walking into Home Depot to buy a battery. So you might be buying that when you purchase a solar system for your home. It might be something that somebody from the installer follows up and pitches to you. So it's a little bit different. And so these programs have to be designed for those differences in mind. What I'd like to do is sort of walk you through this, thinking about it from the perspective of, we've kind of, as an industry, figured out thermostat programs. How do we take those learnings and apply them to the next set of DERs? So why did Eversource first set out to launch all of these programs? Their main objective was to basically flatten their peak. They have a typical peak like any other utility, and they are using these assets to reduce load at that peak time. But there are a lot of benefits to the program in addition to just flattening the peak. So if you think about it from the utility perspective, not only can you apply sort of like a blunt system-wide peak reduction if you have issues on feeders, such as, if, I know this potentially a future problem, but let's say 40 people on a cul-de-sac, I guess you can't have 40 people on a cul-de-sac, on a street adopt electric vehicles, that might be a local problem that you can solve with load control. And then customers are getting compelling financial incentives, which we just heard about, and how important they are. And then I think there's also this importance to some set of customers about playing a role in the decarbonization of our future. So lots of different reasons for customers and utilities to be interested. And as you can see, there's sort of I think this list is still growing, but there's a wide variety of device manufacturers that are participating in this program. And so having one system to sort of manage all of that chaos is really important to the utility. So let's first talk about the Eversource thermostat program. Eversource's goal for this program was 12,000 devices enrolled by the end of 2020. Today, we have grown to about 32,000. It's about a 30 megawatt, give or take, resource. And we were able to get to this in concert with Eversource really quickly because we were using a very standardized acquisition marketing playbook, sort of time tested, and a frictionless enrollment process. I talk about this a lot in my presentations. I know I went through it a lot last year, but having a frictionless enrollment process is sort of key. And so taking that learning and applying it to other DERs is going to be really important as we as an industry try to grow these programs. So moving to their EV program and sort of taking these learnings with us. If you think about why EVs are an interesting resource, you can kind of look at the consumption data. So if everyone just plugs their cars in when they get home from work, it creates this sort of peak at the same time as all, air conditioning peak from about 6 to 9 o'clock. And the tools that have been available to us traditionally to control that peak are time of use rates. But what time of use rates really do is they just create a second peak, which, in the short term might not be problematic. But if you imagine EVs the curve for EV adoption will sort of continue to grow, this could also become problematic. And so what we and our utilities that we work with see as the solution is that we can create managed charging programs where we can sort of we can move the charging windows into the windows that make the most sense. So we can match them with solar production, wind production, with very little impact to the customer, which I'll get into in a second. The other thing is if you are designing a program this way versus sort of like a blunt force rate structure, it's very easy to make changes in the future. So it's very tricky with TOU. Once you implement it, the customers, takes them a little while to get used to it. A few years go by, you change it again, you have to sort of re-educate. But with a more sort of fluid managed charging program, it's much more easy to make changes with a lot less impact to the customer. So thinking about why EVs are so flexible, and I think more flexible than thermostats, is because of the nature of charging behavior. So what we've learned is that, excuse me, customers have an average charge duration of about 2 hours when they're actively pulling power to charge their vehicle. But the reality is, if you have an EV and you think about your charging behavior, you just plug it in and unplug it in the morning. And so you've plugged in your car for about 10 hours, even though you only need about 2 hours. That 8-hour window gives you a lot of flexibility for sort of controlling the vehicle to sponge up extra solar, wind, whatever, and sort of gives the utility the kind of flexibility they need and that I was talking about earlier on. The other thing that we've been doing with EV programs is not just thinking about how the charging can be used to sort of satisfy the utility needs, but how we can meet the needs of customers at the same time. And so we or Eversource and us kind of wanted to understand, what is the thing that's going to move the needle? So for an existing customer, what is the right incentive to get them to sign up? And how do we get more people to adopt these chargers in the market? They decided to implement a sort of like a double incentive structure where anyone who buys a new charger would get $300 up front, and anyone who already has a charger and enrolls gets $150 up front and then $50 a year. So everyone's getting the same amount of money, but in a different time frame. This structure worked really well. We have almost 200 program enrollments, which I know compared to thermostat programs sounds low, but this is actually, I think, for the early days, pretty impressive. We have seen that 52% of these devices are new purchases. So we know that $300 is encouraging people to go out and buy the charger. And then of the people who already had a charger and enrolled, of the existing chargers in the market, 50% of people who had those chargers already enrolled in the program, which is higher than the trend we see with thermostats. So I think part of that is likely early adopters. Part of it's a very generous incentive, but I think it's exciting to think about how we can move the market, especially for utilities that are interested in electrification, how we can move the market toward getting more of these devices deployed. I will leave you with this one point. So I think these programs are awesome. They typically live with DSM, the DSM part of the house at the utility, and utilities still remain very siloed. It made sense when on a lot of these departments were created for them to work separately. But when you think about DERs, they sort of go across all of these departments. And as these programs scale and we show that there is significant reliability and sort of, and we rely more on these resources to meet these intermittency issues, getting all of these stakeholders involved is going to be very key. So if a utility is thinking about creating a more flexible EV or thermostat or battery program, it might be DR to start with, but as the program grows, this becomes more important to grid operators, to market operations if that's being bid into the market. And so finding a way to bring all those stakeholders together will make these programs more scalable and just sort of better performing in the long run. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Okay.
You're live.
All right, thank you so much for your insights, Erica. We're going to actually move directly into our panel discussion now. If you did have questions for Erica, we invite you to enter those under the questions tab, and you can find that right under the live discussion box towards the right of your screen. So we're going to head into our panel discussion now, and it's entitled Driving Engagement and Participation in Energy Saving Solutions. All right, welcome back, everyone. We are now about to head into our panel discussion. Again, the title of that is Driving Engagement and Participation in Energy Savings Programs. We have an exciting panel here to discuss this topic with you, and we'll kick it off by having some introductions from each of our panelists. They'll tell you a little bit about themselves, their company, and sort of how they fit into this discussion that we're about to have. So we're going to kick it off with Abhay, who is the founder and CEO of Bidgely. Abhay?
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting us to be part of this panel. My name is Abhay Gupta, and founder and CEO at Bidgely. Were we going to have a slide share, or we just talk introduction and we'll go through the slide later on?
We can get to your slide now. There you go.
Yeah, just making sure. First and foremost, Bidgely started about 8 years back, has made big strides in the industry. First and foremost, we're a data analytics company and consumer engagement solutions. We've created and brought to the industry a unique technology where we're extracting information out of the electricity, gas, and water meters at this point. Our algorithms apply artificial intelligence on the meter data and also engagement information and data that we collect from customers interacting on the platform. Of course, there's a lot of third-party data that we purchase. And with that information, one of the problems that we are solving is we are creating the most detailed energy profile, most accurate and actionable energy profile for the consumer. So the problem in our industry is we don't know who our customers are. It's very hard for any entity, any business entity to serve their customers if they don't know who their customers are inside out, because you can't create the personalized solutions. So what Bidgely does is, with its technology, it actually creates information on what's happening in the house, who has what type of appliances, who has electric heating versus gas heating, who has an EV, who is charging with level 1 or level 2, when are they charging, do they have a pool pump, is it a single speed? All of this done with no questions asked and no sensors in the house, purely via software analysis on the meter data. About 15 plus patents. So we bring that technology to the industry. And with that, we are able to create a hyper-personalized consumer journey. And since we are talking about consumer engagement today, as we go through this panel, will be able to articulate how some of these technology benefits can be applied or are applied actually today to consumer engagement, operational savings, energy efficiency, peak demand shifting, churn reduction for international market, and generating new revenue for the utilities. So I would say a key contribution here is the very specific and detailed artificial intelligence on meter data, plus creating hyper-personalized engagement solutions for consumers to act and be engaged with the utilities. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you so much, Abe. And now we'll move to James, who is the VP of Product at Zen Ecosystems. James?
Hi, James Maraka here, VP of Product at Zen. Started with Zen 7 to 8 years ago. As hopefully you know, we're a thermostat company. We started with the Zen thermostat Zigbee device, primarily within MSOs, the cable companies. So Comcast, Cox, Rogers in Canada. And as everyone here, I'm sure is aware, heating and cooling being a large consumer of energy within a home, but also being a huge energy consumer within small to medium businesses and making up a significant portion of that bill. So we developed our Zen HQ platform with the name of fleet management of loads within a location that has 3 to 5 thermostats per site, but maybe 1,000 sites. So Taco Bell's, AT&T stores, and so on. We've then given scheduling, some analytics, and some alerting feature set that comes with that control, and then integrating that back into the utility. So demand response programs, Energy Star, different efficiency programs, ultimately to save energy on an aggregate at different programs at scale. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, James. And now we'll move to Joe, who is a program manager at Austin Energy. Joe?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I work with Austin Energy. We are an all-electric utility. We serve about 500,000 customers across 2 counties in the state of Texas. We are a City of Austin department, the largest of which we report to the city manager, and the Austin City Council oversees our operating budget and sets our general strategic policies. We are a vertically integrated utility. We own nuclear, coal, natural gas generating assets. In addition to, we have several PPAs for wind and solar generation. In Austin, we have, we like to live up to our reputation as being one of the more progressive cities in Texas, and we do have a pretty aggressive climate protection goal that our city of council has approved. And so our goal for the city is to have carbon-free electricity generation by 2035. And in this climate protection goal, there are specific goals for demand side savings, for local solar, thermal energy storage that we hope to achieve, demand response capacity. So we have a lot of goals that will help keep me and my team very busy over the next few years as we try to meet them. I'll just quickly comment on 3 of the biggest challenges that I see facing our utility from where I sit. The first is, as Erica alluded to it earlier, there's really a need to help to ensure that we're able to shift our load to the extent that we can, try to make it a little bit more dynamic and make sure that we can help encourage customers to shift their load profile in response to price or other behavioral signals that we send. This is critical as Erica mentioned, we have a lot more renewable energy generation coming on, and that with that renewable energy generation, we're seeing a lot more price volatility in the ERCOT market, where we have higher periods of high prices. And so our programs need to think about how we not just attack kind of the peak demand period, but as this price volatility continues to expand into shoulder periods when renewable energy generation may be decreasing, we need to think about how we can tailor our programs to decrease load across different load types, different customer segments, and across different times of the day. And then the second issue, a big challenge that we face here in Austin, is an issue of equity. So Austin's a rapidly growing city. We have a history of racial and socioeconomic disparity. And so we're really trying to figure out how do we make sure all of our programs cater to our entire customer segment, not just those that are in single family households with broadband. So an example of that is how do we roll out smart thermostats to multifamily properties, especially knowing that a lot of tenants may choose not to have Wi-Fi at home and just may get internet through their cell phones. And the last challenge that we face is just this driving complexity in kind of managing these programs, trying to figure out how we can both allow a lot of diverse customer options, as I've listed out. We have electric vehicle charging programs, we have energy efficiency rebates, demand response rebates. We have an app that allows customers to view usage. So we have, as a customer-driven utility, we've really tried to respond to the needs and requests. And so we've developed a lot of different programs and offerings. And while there's a lot of benefit that brings to our customers, there's a lot of complexity in trying to figure out the most efficient way to manage these. And as we see and hope to connect more loads and engage with customers more, I guess I could say that I feel comfortable about the job security and trying to tackle these issues and figure out how we can work with partners like Energy Hub or Bidgely to continue to, get our overall load profile to be a little bit more dynamic and controllable, so we can better respond to the changing climate goals and renewable energy generation that we see here in the ERCOT market.
All right, thank you, Joe. And now we'll have introduction from Michael, who is the Executive Director of Innovation and Growth at Constellation Energy. Michael?
Hi, thanks, Patrice, and thank you, everybody. I'm Mike Waisgrass. I manage innovation and growth activities for Constellation, which is the retail energy business for Exelon. And several years ago, we came to terms with the fact that retail energy was facing a lot of headwinds. There was a lot of low cost energy out there, less volatility, and so we decided to start to focus on a kind of a starting with customer problems at the core. Started focusing on how we were going to develop additional products and services and solutions to address those. So as you can see on the slide here, we've focused on a set of solutions that are around energy management and connected home, but more importantly, a set of plans across all of our core businesses. So energy management, insights and analytics. We have a robust and growing home services business, and we have a set of optimization tools, whether it's from those insights and analytics or the connected home platform that that we've launched recently. And as a result, we've seen a lot of benefits from the efficiency of our acquisition efforts to customer churn has improved dramatically. And so we feel like we're on the right track by focusing on that integrated set of energy management and technology solutions.
And now we'll head into our Q&A. Y'all can just advance the slides. All right, wonderful. All right, so I've talked a little bit today about, just the mere fact that energy programs or these utility-centric energy programs have been available for some time, yet participation in a lot of these programs has remained well below that, 15% mark. Some remain below that 10% mark. So I know we talk a lot, and we will talk a little bit more about some of the barriers, towards, or the barriers preventing, greater adoption of these products. But I want to start with, finding out a little bit more about what programs are actually working. And by working, I mean, which ones are appealing to consumers? What are they attracted to? And which ones are they actually engaged with currently? And I'm going to ask Joe to kick this one off. So Joe from Austin Energy.
Thanks, Patrice. So I'll just kind of mention some of the programs that we've seen work well. And I guess I'll just add that I'll try to differentiate this in what has worked well in kind of a pre-shelter at home world. And then maybe later in the Q&A, we can address how we've tried to adjust our programs and some of the impacts that we've seen from the coronavirus. So in terms of energy management programs that are working well at Austin Energy, we see a really steady and continued increase enrollment in our BYO thermostat load curtailment program. So whether a customer purchases a Honeywell or a Nest or an Ecobee, improved thermostat, once they install it, they receive a one-time incentive from Austin Energy to participate in our Power Partner thermostat program. So before the shelter at home period commenced, we were on track this year to about double the number of enrolled thermostats that we had within the Austin Energy district compared to last year. So we've definitely seen continued success there with the BYO thermostat model. We've also seen steady growth in our commercial demand response programs. So especially given what I mentioned earlier, where in the ERCOT market, we're seeing a little bit higher price volatility and some increasing prices. So at Austin Energy, we're really thinking about, how can we try to work with our commercial customers to grow our DR capacity. We've recently updated our incentive, and we're going to try to do a better job reaching out to customers and trying to enroll them in more fast response or auto DR programs. And I'll just also mention that we've gotten some really good customer feedback from an Austin Energy app that we recently rolled out. It's actually not an app, it's a website that behaves just like an app on your smartphone, but it allows customers to view their usage. It's not real time, I think there's a couple day or 1 day delay, but they can see their usage, and then they can also set price alerts so that for residential customers, as soon as they're about to maybe advance to another tier of pricing, they get a push text alert or an email alert notifying them, so then they're able to respond accordingly. So those are three items that we've seen continued success in. And I would just say, maybe to end, we've had pretty steady and good participation in kind of our bread and butter energy efficiency incentives that are provided to our residential, multifamily, and commercial customers. Like many utilities, we've seen a gradual decrease in the lighting retrofit opportunities. So I think at Austin Energy, we're really thinking about how we can make our HVAC offerings a little more robust, especially trying to target to see if we can push our market to invest in more heat pumps. So I'll just mention that those are a handful of the energy management programs that we've seen success with.
So question on the app, the new app or the website that you mentioned, is that one? Okay, I think he lost audio because I'm not hearing.
I'm here.
Okay, sorry about that. So for the app that you mentioned or website, now, is that new? Did you say that was new? When did you roll that out?
It's relatively new. I don't remember the exact date. It's probably been out for maybe over a year now. So maybe not that new, but
okay.
So an Austin Energy customer can log in using the same login for their billing system. And it's a very simple interface where they can see their usage, they can see the daily cost and at different time intervals. So I wouldn't say that it's particularly in terms of the visualizations you see, like the highest end, but it really gets the point across. And then again, it provides customers with the tiered alerts so that if they're about to advance into a higher price tier, they can receive notification and then adjust their behavior accordingly.
Okay, so my follow-up question was, how long do they stay engaged with it? Because I know for these programs, a lot of consumers will start out, and in the beginning it's very interesting and they're monitoring it and checking it every week. And then by the, 5th month or 6th month, for some reason the appeal is not there, they're less engaged. So I was just trying to find out if, that is sustaining engagement, or what are you seeing in terms of maintaining that engagement?
I don't have data specific to the app in terms of how many new users or users continue to log in, but I will say overall, kind of this concept of especially for our demand response type programs, we want to avoid the customer fatigue that they may experience. Austin, we're a cooling driven peak load period, so when it gets really hot, the temperatures can easily exceed 100 degrees here. Cooling load goes up significantly, and so that's when we typically call our events. So I don't have the data, but I do know, after having discussed with some of our staff who help operate those programs, that the per event opt-out rate does tend to increase as the summer progresses. I don't know exactly by how much, but that is a trend that we've seen. So we have been thinking about how we might try to adjust our incentives and offerings so that they're more recurring instead of a one-time incentive. Do we make it possibly a monthly bill credit or something along those lines to make sure that we keep that continued engagement? So it's certainly something that's top of mind for us, is how to keep these customers involved in participating.
Yeah, thank you. Is anyone else seeing any programs that are really attracting customers more than the programs that have been in existence for years, or any that's particularly?
Yeah, I'm happy to add some to that note. Do you want to go before that? James,
sorry, I'm on camera. I'll jump in there.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So, I mean, some of the more interesting programs which we're seeing are coming from retailers offering innovative business models. whether they're around clean or flat subscriptions. Inspire Energy is one that comes to mind. But on top of that, places like CCAs, who are the community choice aggregators, who are offering a subtly different, business model or offering, and really meeting the customer on something that they're interested in, clean energy, $1, a money savings, a community choice, community feeling. And from a CCA perspective, it's interesting that they're still trying to figure out how the market works. They're eager to please customers. So they're, again, meeting the customer they want, but they're also on the hook for the resource adequacy or the RPS, the renewables. So they're trying harder than the utilities. And we're seeing a lot of really good traction there with, again, smart home adoption, but meeting it because of another factor of a business innovation.
Okay, I think I heard someone else trying to jump in. Is that you, Abhay?
Yeah, I think I've actually quite a bit to contribute in this one. We have had programs for over 3 years, I would say 2.5 years, and we are still at 50% open rates on those programs, and which is fantastic. So I think you asked a question about the open rates and customer interaction going down. We have applied some very differentiated theories. First of all, we're not energy shaming consumers by saying, hey, you are doing worse than your neighbors, so go fix this. And people have a very big backlash around it. Sure, people react as a psychological effect. So the approach we have taken is energy empowerment, not just energy shaming. And by telling people, hey, you're spending $800 out of your X amount of total bill on cooling or heating, and then out of which, how much can you improve by doing certain things? It's empowerment by telling people, how much would I improve if I did this? And that's a quantification of knowing, just like your phone bill, credit card bill are itemized, your energy bill is itemized with us. And so they can figure out, hey, what do I do? So that's rule number one, right? Don't energy shame them, energy empower them to make decisions which are meaningful. Second thing is, we've seen this, and Joe, absolutely great work. You're making progress, taking things live. One of the differentiated opinions that we bring to the table is, having this fatigue comes for consumers because we are serving them with non-personalized information. Like if we take the thermostat program and send it to everybody, and by the way, look, I don't even have an AC in my house. I'm not going to be interested in opening that email second time. But I'll give you a different example. Let's say I was looking for a house, and then I get a new email from Redfin or one of those guys every day, and I open it every single day. Okay. The key is not how many touch points you did, but key is, are your touch points personalized to consumers? And then people open every single email or many emails. And that's how we deliver 50% email open rates, even though we are not adhering to, hey, I only want to send 3 emails per month or something like that. So what we've done is this whole hyper-personalization, energy empowerment, instead of shaming people with comparing them to others, is the one which has given really good traction. The other part we've applied is targeting. You target people with ROI, like Mass Save program in Massachusetts. They have money, but they can't even get people to participate in the programs. So if people don't know how much they're going to save, they're not going to put money out of their pocket and participate in programs. So you want to have ROI information for people to say, what will I save if I did this action? I think those things have done wonders for us in terms of engaged rate being there, and etc. Okay.
Some people would say the comparison is more motivation versus shaming.
No, this is one type of motivation. But I can tell you that the first concern that most utilities have is how many people will backlash when you start comparing. I am telling you from actually reading tens of thousands of customer feedback, where it's not like people's first choice. Sure, there's a psychological effect. About 5% of people will react to a psychological effect, but 95% are not.
Right. All right, thank you. And we do, just to remind you that we do have a poll question on this topic. So we do want to hear your feedback as well, your thoughts on which energy, efficiency solutions consumers are finding most valuable. So go ahead and, let us know your thoughts there, and we'll share those results in a moment. But with that, I'm going to move on to the next question that our panelists are going to discuss, which is talking more now about some of the barriers that are really preventing consumers from participating in these programs. So we found out what's working, and we sort of, in that talk, in that whole discussion, talk about the incentives and what drives participation and engagement. But let's talk about what's really preventing that. Is it 65% of consumers who have never participated in a program? What's preventing them from participating in these programs? And we're going to kick that one off with Michael.
Thanks, Patrice. So, I'm actually coming at it from the perspective, the dual perspective of working for a retail provider, but also, some of the challenges that our utility companies have as well. But I mean, fundamentally, at the core of it, from my perspective, it's really about the why. It's why should I participate? What's in it for me? How hard is it going to be for me to participate? So as I mentioned, with energy prices being generally low, that kind of creates an additional challenge of kind of creating value by solving other customer problems. And I think to Abhay's point, I think it starts with insights and analytics, actionable insights and analytics, how they're using energy, but also giving them the tools to make a difference where they want to make a difference. And then another aspect of it from our perspective is really education, about potential other issues. One of the things that we found pretty effective in driving customers from a retail energy perspective is bundling of solutions with energy. So kind of taking the focus off of rate per kilowatt hour and putting it into what kind of value I'm getting, and we're seeing a lot of really good results from bundling HVAC analytics and fault detection with energy plans. And then we also have a connected home bundle where customers get, kind of a basic, starter, energy management capabilities through our connected home platform, along with their energy plan. And those two programs have actually yielded some very good results in terms of our, as I mentioned earlier, our acquisition, effectiveness and the churn and other, things like NPS and customer satisfaction. So that's been kind of how we've addressed some of the barriers to, why is this relevant for me?
Nice. So did anyone else have any thoughts on the barriers that are, preventing participation? All right, it seems like we have the results from our poll here on our screen. So let me go ahead and share that with everyone. So we did ask, which energy efficiency solutions are consumers finding most valuable? So we have 4% of the audience saying it's energy audits, pardon me. We have 13% saying it's, the energy consumption breakdowns, sort of what Abhay was talking about that you find on your bill. And then we have 26% saying actionable energy savings insights from the utility, which Michael was sort of alluding to just now, that we want those results to provide more actionable insights versus just providing a whole lot of information on the page. And then we have 4% saying alerts on high consumption will be useful, which that's a pretty low number for providing alerts. And then we have 52% saying smart products with automated energy saving features. So most of you perceive that smart products that provide that automated energy management features will actually be most effective or most valuable for driving energy efficiency. All right, now let's dive deeper into this panel discussion. And I do want to ask again if anyone else had any thoughts on the barriers before I move on. All right, well, let's move on then. So I know, Joe, you had some additional comments in your response earlier about the effects of COVID-19. So I wanted to get into that a little bit more, just trying to examine whether or not, with more consumers working at home and just spending more time in the home in general, if this is really helping to drive demand for any of these energy efficiency programs, or is it having any effect at all in the demand for energy that you're seeing?
So I did a quick kind of polling around with some of the other staff in my office, try to get a feel for where their programs stand now compared to about this time last year. And so the results were a little varied. So I'll just give a high level snapshot. So for our traditional home residential HVAC and appliance rebate program, they have seen about a 10% decrease in the number of applications. for the whole home performance with Energy Star program, they've seen a more significant decrease, about a 20 to 30% drop. What we have seen an increase in, as I think I mentioned earlier, in terms of the BYO thermostat program and the number of customers who are enrolling in our load curtailment program, our Power Partner thermostat program, we've seen about a 50% increase compared to the same period last year. So I will also mention that even though we've seen a significant increase in the number of devices enrolled, we have also seen in terms of what we allow the customer to opt out for each event. So our per event opt out number is going to increase significantly compared to last year. I don't have the exact number in terms of opt-out rate based off of, because we've also seen an increase in the total number of thermostats, but it does seem like the opt-out rate will likely increase, and we suspect that, is related to more folks being at home and wanting the AC on during those, peak periods. So I'll just also quickly wrap up that we've seen pretty steady applications for our home electrical vehicle charging, and also for our electric bike incentives, which we also offer. We've seen pretty steady number of applications there. I thought we would see a dramatic increase, but we haven't yet, even though I think there's been a lot of news that more people are biking now since shelter at home has taken place. So I would say overall, we've seen kind of a varied response to our different programs.
That's very interesting. Did anyone else have any thoughts on that? Did I hear a cat in the background? Okay. Did anyone else have any thoughts or seen any interesting things regarding demand as we sort of navigate through this pandemic?
Increase in thermostats because, as I said, people at home. But from a HVAC maintenance perspective, we saw an increase through some of our HVAC contracting because people thought their HVAC, the air conditioning, was running efficiently because most of the time it was running in the after hours when they were getting home. But as more people were staying at home, they found that wasn't actually always the case during the middle of the day. As that came up through to some SMB locations and having fast food outlets or similar places running with lobbies completely empty, doors closed, being able to have that control at that level as well, saw definitely an increase in smart controls as the hours shifted in that SMB market too. So yeah,
that's interesting. All right, we are going to move to the next question, which is, we want to talk a little bit more about segmentation, because when we talk about energy efficiency, and I did sort of allude to it or mention it in the beginning of my program, that, when it comes to energy management, one size just doesn't fit all. Different things are going to motivate different consumers, and they won't motivate consumers equally. So when we talk about, segmentations, one of the things I want to figure out is, what are the segments that really matter as it relates to energy management, and how do you engage these different segments? Like, what strategies are working better for what consumer segments? And I'm going to ask Michael to kick that one off.
Thank you, Patrice. So, not to sound sarcastic, but all segments are like children. They're all important, but they all present unique challenges, in a lot of different ways. So I think from our perspective, I'll give you an example. We're conducting a connected home energy management pilot in Annapolis with our utility, Baltimore Gas and Electric. And when we looked at the segments, we actually divided it from a consumer perspective into three segments that we wanted to get more learnings around. One was early adopters, so folks that were more tech forward and would be more likely to use new solutions, when it comes to energy management. And what's also important from a utility perspective is the next segment is really the elderly. So how do you look at from that perspective, how do you address that? And the last one of significance was low and moderate income. So each of those presented different challenges, but as we thought about it, we designed slightly different approaches in terms of the solutions that we would be offering in this kind of pilot demonstration, and we engaged them all in different ways. We actually used a lot of community advocates and other organizations within the community to kind of help recruit and identify people that would be good for the pilot. Now, this is obviously a pilot, so it's not at full scale. So it's a much different paradigm when you talk about scale. But that's kind of how we looked at it, and we're in the middle of it, so we don't have a whole lot of tangible results yet. But one of the things we have seen is that by designing solutions and proactively reaching out through means that are different than maybe traditional communication means has allowed us to get more adoption into the pilot in these segments. And we actually have a high adoption and activation rate of the solutions that we put into each of these segments. So that's kind of a little bit of the way that we're looking at it from that perspective.
So then is it the same programs that you're offering, but you're marketing it to these segments in different ways? Or are you offering sort of different programs to these different
Well,
segments?
it's really about the technology. We're offering slightly different, technologies. Some are a little bit more involved and integrated, and others are more kind of point solutions and things like that. So it's really about trying to match the solution with, what we think the customer and segment requirements are.
Interesting. All right. Did anyone else have any thoughts on, how do we segment consumers and how do we best, target these segments with different marketing strategies, and how do we, just drive that participation and engagements among the different segments?
Yeah. Patrice, I have some views on that. I think the traditional method of segmentation was using demographic targeting, information that we purchase from the open market about size of the house, type of the house. There are attributes that are available from, from parcel data and from other things. That has been the basis in past or history, or possibly some information like people who sign up for financial assistance or specific rate plans. That is it. Most of the segmentation information is done based on demographic and third-party purchase data. What we have done is we've actually changed it dramatically. Instead of having 3 or 5 or 8 segments of low and medium income or technology advanced or those kind of segments, we've actually created a hyper-personalized segment. So when you say hyper-personalized, which means segment of one, you are not same as your neighbor or other people in the city. So every single consumer has, in our system, every single consumer has, let's say, about 80 to 100 tags. And these tags reflect different things. Like you may have a pool pump, your neighbor may not have a pool pump. You may be running your AC for 2 hours a day, your neighbor may be running for 8 hours a day, etc., etc. So besides appliances in usage and behavior and preferences, whether you're an eco person, you browse more of EV stuff, etc. We have 80 to 100 tags, and the combination of a number of values for those 80 to 100 tags makes it a unique combination for you as a user. So it's a segment of one for us. And what that does is our messaging for every single person is personalized to saying, hey, if you were to participate in this thermostat program, you can save about $85 a year because we noticed that you're spending $300 in your heating and cooling, right? That's the level of personalization. And let's say if I don't have AC, in fact, I don't have AC in my house, I still went ahead and took my $75 rebate from PG&E because they don't know that I don't have AC in my house. That's a sheer waste of money. So we have taken that approach of knowing what's happening in the house and making those highly personalized offers for each customer, but then also write the ROI. So in fact, I would say a straight example was our platform, which was released in last October for this hyper personalization. The click rates went up from 4% to 8.5% in a month for the new programs because the messages was far more relevant to the user instead of just discrete 4 or 5 segments. So that has been very, very effective for us in terms of segmentation.
That's a good point, Abhi. So, we know that, segmenting customers have, proven or really helped to drive participation in the past. And you're saying that even bringing it down even more to a granular level,
yeah,
making it highly personalized will drive participation even more.
Absolutely.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Did anyone else have any thoughts on that? Or anyone else has used any, segmentation methods that have really worked or, generated good results? No? All right, so we are going to look at the results of our next poll. We did ask about the biggest barriers to keeping consumers engaged. We asked that to the panelists, and we also had that as a poll question. So it seems that most of you think it's needing better incentives to be energy efficient, and also the need for more actionable insight, which Michael also said. So it's interesting how these results, are similar. So we have those two that stand out, and then everything else sort of falls into that 12% of you who perceive that as the biggest barrier. So 12% perceive ineffective marketing strategies as one of the problems, which does make sense when you look at the level or the familiarity numbers and the fact that those haven't grown much in a really long time. Then 12% perceive the information as too complex. And then another 12% say the lack of real-time information is really a big barrier here. And we need to, work towards getting customers this information in real time. So I did have a couple more questions that I wanted to ask the panelists, and then we'll get into your questions. I do see that you guys have a lot of questions being queued up. We're going to get to them, but we're going to ask a couple more questions to the panelists before we jump on into your questions. All right, so what I want to get at with the panelists now is, how is AI being woven into these energy efficiency and demand response programs? Now, and for those, I know, Abe, you have quite a bit to say on this because you've actually leveraged AI in your solution a bit. But I want you to emphasize, how these different AI strategies are helping to drive adoption or drive engagement, or both.
Sure. I think I'll give you very specific examples and keep it short because it's a repeat of the message that I've given. Targeting. For example, if you're targeting a pool pump program, with the AI, what you can do is, once we've run the analysis on your data, you can run a query saying, hey, give me top 200,000 customers who are running a single speed pool pump in the peak hours. Okay. Boom. In about 30 seconds, you'll get the list of 200,000 customers, and boom, you go and have your program promoted to those customers with your ROI. Or if you're running a lighting program, like Joe was saying, hey, we're already getting, we squeezed enough out of our lighting program. What do I do next, right? So if you say, give me all the people who are using inefficient lighting in their home, the system has already analyzed how much lighting is being used, divided by the square feet of the home, and knows that this home is likely still in the inefficient lighting, but this home is, you can go target those homes. So targeting is number one thing when you're reaching out to customers, because no other business in any other industry actually does mass marketing these days for any programs. So that is, I would say, number one. And second is, I'll keep it short. Second is ROI. When you are interacting with customers, we know we targeted, but how do they know that we targeted them, right? If you reach out to me, you may have targeted me, but how do I know that it is relevant for me? So giving an ROI equation with relevant message saying, hey, you spend this much money with this program, you can save this much money, personalized for me. Because if you don't give me specific thoughts, if I invest in the program and I don't see the savings, I'm going to not carry that same reputation. You're going to not earn that reputation from me, right? So targeting and ROI-driven personalized message, I would say those are the two big takeaways for maximizing your engagement.
Okay, thank you. So we've talked about, how AI is, helping to drive this participation. And let's talk or move a little bit, because we did see the results from that poll question that, the majority of the audience thinks, it's the use of smart home devices that's really going to, or is really so far helping to drive adoption, or it's the one that consumers are finding valuable as it relates to energy management programs. So can we talk more about how smart home partnerships with energy providers can help to drive this participation? Let's break that down a little bit, and we'll start with James.
So I mean, partnerships is one that's really core for Zen. We've developed our thermostat and for the Comcast Xfinity platforms and into the Cox Home Life platforms, and over the last 7 or so years, having hundreds of thousands of thermostats out there in the field, and that's connected load from a home automation perspective, essentially an upsell to a cable contract. Where I'd like to see the industry progressing, the insurance industry is doing really well of offering insurance through a home, a cable provider or so on, and really good partnerships at that level. And from an energy perspective, the barriers to entry of monetizing or enabling those now connected loads at the cable providers and so on is at Comcast. The cable company is across many different regions, so often covers not just multiple programs, but multiple utilities. And trying to find a one utility, one program fits all is actually incredibly difficult. So where we come at from is, as the manufacturer, is trying to help our partners, whether it's a clean energy retailer, to bridge that gap and make the introduction on the other side as well. But keeping up with the regulatory, so understanding the Energy Star requirements, the Open ADR and utility requirements, and then enrolling our devices through those marketplaces, and then being able to enable that connectivity. But I definitely think as a connected home asset, which has now been certainly monetized over the past 5 years that it's been installed, there's definitely huge advantages now for the utilities to make that API connection at the back end and turn it on at those literally hundreds of megawatts just sitting there connected, but not utilized.
Interesting. All right, I do have one quick question before we get to the audience questions. Can voice control play a role at all in this? Can voice control actually help to drive participation? Is anybody seeing any good applications of that, that they can mention or talk about?
I'll just add one cute example that I've seen. When being able to, it's a bit more conversational rather than, hey, Alexa, what's my bill? Google, what's my bill? When you're making a temperature adjustment, hey, turn down my heating or cooling, and then following up with a conversation. Oh, it's warmer in here because there's a DR event active. Are you sure you want to make the change? So making a little bit more conversational, and again, creating that engagement, that awareness of why something's there.
Sounds like it makes it a little easier too, if you don't have to get up and adjust the thermostat yourself, or
tell your kids to go stop adjusting your
ask,
thermostat.
your voice assistant to do it for you. Interesting. All right, so let's actually move on over and see what our audience has been asking. All right, so the first question we have here queued up is, what is the best way for software solutions to represent the impact of carbon emissions for consumer participation in any of these programs? So I'll repeat that again because it was pretty long. So it's, what is the best way that software solutions can represent the impact of carbon emissions on consumer participation in these energy programs? And it sounds like it's a big question, but I'll let you guys decide who wants to jump in and tackle it first.
I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand the question. Is it more about reflection of how these actions affect carbon emissions, or are we catering more to the eco-conscious people who are motivated more by the carbon message instead of savings message?
Right. It sounds to me like it's hitting on your ROI point that you mentioned earlier, that they want to be able to identify, how these programs are impacting the carbon emission.
So of course, these are currencies. You can talk in the currency of kilowatt hour savings, which obviously most people don't get it. You can talk in terms of dollars, which everybody gets it. And then you can talk in terms of the cars off the street or trees back on the planet, or CO2 emission or whatever, right? I think it goes back to the personalization. Once you've classified that a person is more conscious or more eco-conscious, or rather, the personality, rather than savings driven or etc., then your messaging is personalized. But at the end of the day, they're all different currencies on how. And what we do in general is, I know the question, we generally throw out different types of messages and see what latches on with the customer. If a customer starts clicking on more of eco-conscious type of emails and messages, we start tagging them. Once in a while, it's actually the easiest part is just ask the customer, hey, what do you prefer? Instead of trying to infer some very hard problems, just ask the question on day one. Hey, do you prefer this kind of messaging or this kind of messaging? But long story short, I think it's a currency. It's a unit in which you represent the savings. And as long as you know which customer wants what, you use that currency.
Okay, so it all depends. All right, another question. What prevents utilities from implementing bring your own DER programs? So they want to know what are the barriers then that are preventing utilities from implementing those bring your own DER programs? I think that might be a Joe question, but anyone can jump in.
I'll start us off. So I would say that from our perspective, there are a variety of different connected loads and systems or software companies or providers that can help a utility or another service provider kind of access and make the load reactive to their needs. So I guess one of the issues that we have seen, or at least that I've seen, is just there are a lot of different providers out there that have different systems that cater towards maybe more HVAC or maybe in a more commercial application versus more focused on a specific residential load. And so I guess from the utility perspective, what I want to avoid is I want to try to maximize my dynamic or my reactive load while minimizing any kind of service fees that I would then have to pass through to these providers. I don't want to say that I want to get rid of them entirely, but just from an operational efficiency perspective, we can't afford, for the amount of load that we're trying to manage, necessarily secure a lot of different contracts with a lot of different providers. So to the extent that we can find systems or providers that can speak to each other more, and it's more of a seamless integration. I think something earlier that Erica mentioned was that we really want to make the enrollment process as frictionless as possible. From my perspective in deploying these programs as a utility, it's not just the enrollment process, it's everything after that, making it as frictionless as possible. And I guess there is just difficulty in trying to navigate that space to determine, who are the right kind of providers. These folks can aggregate these kinds of loads in these markets. This company does the other specialty. And so it's up to, utilities like Austin Energy to figure out which of these providers kind of meet the needs best suited for their customers and the segments that they're trying to target.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next question, which is, as utilities start to offer more connected services, for example, home automation and security, how are they thinking about managing the increase in customer reaction, which is required to deliver these services? So I'm thinking this question is asking about support, because utilities, of course, would not traditionally have been providing support for these. So the question is really, how will utilities handle the support of these new connected services that they're bringing on? It sounds like you again, Joe, but I think Michael can also jump in on this one.
I'm happy to start. I mean, I think that that is a challenge as they start to offer different products and services, within the existing infrastructure. I think it's a combination of things. I think that more self-service tools, more things that are available in terms of content that's available for customers to reference, and then also partnerships. There's a bunch of unique kinds of partnerships and organizations that can provide a whole set of tools and resources to be able to address that. I do think it's important because in some markets you kind of get into that gray area of what costs are being borne by the customers versus what they're paying for directly. What's being allocated to them versus what's being borne directly. So, but I think it's a function of actually evolving the tools and the relationships that can address those kinds of challenges.
Okay, thank you. Do we have time for one more question, or should we have one more? Okay, all right. So one more question before we wrap the panel discussion and allow you guys to jump on to the post-session networking discussions. And that question is, how can AI differentiate between TV use and lighting use? It would seem they look the same on the meter. So how can AI differentiate between TV use and lighting use? It would seem that they would look the same on the meter.
I think that question is for me.
Right? I was going to say it.
So I think there has been I'll start with the basic. There have been a lot of interesting news around these technologies over the many years. And I remember there was an article on saying, hey, we can snoop your home and figure out what channel on TV that you're watching by looking at the signals on the electricity. So just like 20 seconds of education, the information is hidden in the data. And the more data you have, the more information you can gather. For example, today's meters are collecting information at 60-minute or 30-minute or 15-minute interval data. No, you can't figure out by any possible means whether it's TV or your whatever the other small appliances that are being used with that information. Sure, if you go down to the technology of instead of sampling it once every 15 minutes, if you were to sample once every microsecond, so million samples per second, which is when there's some technologies out there in the field, like Sense, right? Who would do million samples per second, they might be able to figure out whether it's TV running or something else running. It still would be very hard for them to figure out the amount of energy going in TVs because the LED TVs today are so power efficient. Like if you were to run your TV for 5 hours a day for the whole year, it'll cost you $15. You're not going to be able to figure that out in the meter data. So the bigger question, so long story short, you may be able to figure out if you're going extreme in the technologies, but those technologies are not scalable. How do you get to your 5 million homes and 3 million homes? Ask Mike or ask Joe. He's not going to invest in $300 per home to just figure out what TV is consuming as energy, right? So going back from the data that we have available, which is AMI or non-AMI data, finding the top loads like heating, cooling, pool pump, EV, water heater, etc., is absolutely doable, but not to the level of what the question had asked.
Yes. Okay, thank you. And with that, we will have to wrap up our panel discussion as your networking discussions are about to start. So to find these discussions, you can look at your agenda up there in your menu, drop-down menu, and scroll down and you'll find where the networking discussions are. You click on that and then you'll find the 2 discussions that we're about to have. And then from there, you'll be able to select the one that you will want to join. It will take you directly into the meeting. So thank you guys for joining us for this panel discussion. Thank you so much to the panelists. It was a very insightful discussion with very unique perspectives. I appreciate it. And I invite you now to go ahead and enjoy the post session networking discussions. Thank you again for joining us today.